Hello, and welcome back for our next lesson on cyanotype process. This time we are going to consider cyanotype process on ceramics. Now, I have covered this subject before in previous videos that you can find for free on YouTube. However, in this one, I'll obviously update some of the information from the previous videos, and I will give you some extra knowledge about best practice as it may be. So this is me, I'm Jo Howell, and my website is maverickbeyond.com. I'm a cyanotype artist or photographic artist, which essentially means that I use different photographic processes to create artworks in many different formats. I decided to do cyanotype on ceramic because this is actually easier than the next lesson, which we'll be following, which is about toning cyanotypes. So even though ceramics seems like it should probably be a more difficult process to get your head around, I'm here to tell you it's quite easy. But if you're interested in reading up any of my supplementary writings, then you want to go to my blog on my website. And if you're more interested in the artworks that I'm making on a day-to-day basis, then you can go and check out my Instagram at Art in Sunderland, or you can go and follow me on X, which is at Maverick Art. On X, I'm kind of talking probably more politics and only sharing work every now and then, but my Instagram is solely dedicated to the art that I produce. Lesson number 6, cyanotype on ceramic. Some of these tiles probably appeared in the previous video that I made about cyanotype on ceramic, but I will also be covering the new works that I've made for this presentation. What will you need? Actually, there's not that much that you are going to need, funny enough. You're going to need your usual cyanotype solutions, ideally already mixed with water, a minimum of 24 hours before you combine them to use on ceramics. So don't use freshly made chemistry. If you've just mixed it with crystals, then give yourself 24 hours and let that sit. Cyanotype solution, water, biscuit-fired ceramics, and that can be stoneware, earthenware, or porcelain. And you're going to need a clear yacht varnish, your brushes, and a sponge. But what are biscuit-fired tiles? Biscuit-fired tiles are ceramics that have gone through an initial firing process, which changes them from clay into a hard-wearing ceramic piece. So whilst it's still clay before it's being fired, it can still react with water, whereas at this point, it's become an inert surface for us to work on top of. Because it's biscuit fired but unglazed, it means that the tiles are still porous, which is perfect for the cyanotype process. If you are trying out this process on glazed tiles, then you're going to have to wait until lessons 8 and 9, so you can find out how to mix the cyanotype solution with gelatin. So essentially, once you have glazed your tile and it is no longer porous, you treat it like glass. If you're using your own handmade clays, really focus down on creating as smooth and as level a surface as possible, especially if you're intending to use a photographic negative. Obviously, you're going to want to achieve fine detail. To do that, you're going to have to make sure your surface is very well prepared. If you are trying to use plants and such like, then you probably have a little bit more wriggle room because obviously they're more malleable objects basically, so you can bend them around curves and things like that, and then maybe just use either cling film or sellotape to hold them in place for the exposure. But that's up to you to figure out. I tend to work with flat surfaces because I'm mainly concerned with the photographic element of it. How do we best apply the cyanotype? This example here, even though I really actually quite love the image. It was taken by two little boys using a pinhole camera that I had built, and they were at a fun day over in South Hilton where we were thinking about the Battle of Sunderland, which was a Civil War reenactment type thing. And anyway, the little boys ran straight out and took this photograph, which I thought was quite impactful. However, if you have a look at the surface of the actual piece of work, you're able to see that there is an awful lot of pitting around the outside edge, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. Okay, so I've come to the kitchen laboratory to quickly prepare a cyanotype ceramic tile for you. I have some acetate negatives here from a studio shoot that I did for Sunderland Museum and Winter Gardens a couple of years ago now, celebrating Art Deco glass by Joblings in Sunderland. So I thought that was a really good idea to quickly show you how to do a cyanotype tile with a little bit of heritage. Okay, so piece of glass, you're going to need your negatives, and here I have a box of tiles that were from a stockist in Bath. So I'm not going to go too wild, and I'm not going to do too many of them because I want to give each one my full attention. These are the tiles. I think these are porcelain tiles actually, because the grain is really, really beautiful. There's no label on my box, so I'm really, really sorry, I'm not sure. However, it's got a beautiful fine grain, and if you're doing a photograph, really, that's exactly what you want. I'm going to try not to manhandle them too much because even though I'm clean, I'm also a human, and humans make grease, so you don't really want to get everything really greasy. You need your cyanotype solutions, and these are ones that I mixed up not that long ago. And then later on, you're going to need a yacht varnish. You're going to need a receptacle to put your cyanotype solutions in. You're going to need a sponge brush. So you've got a receptacle, sponge brush for applying cyanotype, and a sponge for washing down and getting all that dust off and just giving a little bit of a damp layer. So, as you know, always shake your chemistry. You can be doing this at night if you're worried about like strong sunlight and things like that. A cloud has gone over the sun. There's still probably going to be enough to do an exposure. Tiny, tiny little bit of part A. Same again, tiny bit of part B. Hide them in the shadow of the windowsill. I'm ready to go. I'll give it once more over with my damp sponge. Again, just a tiny little bit, taking everything so it's damp, and then, I really don't want to go too wild, because the challenge is, once you've managed to coat your tile, is then getting the cyanotype solution out. Wash it in. cyanotype solution. You can see I'm not going over the top. I'm just trying to make sure that everything is covered with a very thin amount. Or you might be able to see that anyway. It dries really, really quickly. And that's it. She's prepared. Right. That's what we got. I'm going to put this outside in the sun. You only need to mix a small amount of your cyanotype solutions. Once again, and I'll keep repeating it because it is true, and sometimes, I'm guilty of forgetting it myself. So, less is more. Don't over-egg it. We are working on a molecular level, so you only need a little layer. Like I say, even 14 years on, I'm still kind of saying there's more for me than for you guys. Okay, so creating a contact print, you're going to need to use a pane of glass, which again is another reason why you might want to use just flat tile surfaces. You can use anything that you would usually use when you're making your images. So you can use objects, you can use plants and things like that. It's just the more three-dimensional the ceramic piece that you're trying to put images on, the more complexity you're going to have to think about. So, for example, if you have a cylinder, and it's a good cylinder, like so. Where's my thing? Like so. Then you might be able to just wrap your image around the outside edge. So, for example, imagine that this piece of paper is my negative that I want to wrap around the curved surface. So essentially, you would just be able to do that and just find a way to fix that into position. But then when it comes to the exposure, because you've created a three-dimensional space with lots of different surfaces, you might have to do several different points of exposure and rotate it as you go along. Again, I didn't really get that stuck into it. I'm not a ceramicist, so it's not really, I wasn't making the objects to put prints on. I was putting the prints on objects to see how differently we would read for photography if it was on a different type of object. Anywho, you can investigate whatever you like. What I found was really important was actually making sure that the surface of the tile was clean. And not only was it clean, but it was a little tiny bit damp. Not wet, just damp. And that gets rid of all of the dust that might have accumulated on the surface. But also, because the surface is already just a little bit damp, this helps when you are applying your cyanotype, so you don't end up putting too much in because it won't sink in as far. One of the main problems when you are working with cyanotype on ceramic is washing and setting your cyanotype. So this is where I'll come back to all of this pitting, which you can also see on this ceramic tile as well. It's another one from the same kind of setup. Basically what happens is, because it is still porous, the tile has got air bubbles trapped inside of it. So you apply your cyanotype solution, you expose it to the level that you want to expose it, and then when you wash it, you're trying to get rid of all of that excess cyanotype solution. And these ones that I did originally with all of the pitting, and by pitting I mean these small holes of that where the emulsion of the cyanotype has essentially fizzed off, I wasn't wiping them down before before applying the cyanotype. I would give them like a brief dry wipe with a cloth to get the dust off. And it was this time round when I was doing another batch of prints when I thought maybe the surface should be damp when you apply the cyanotype. And I'm going to say this straight up, yes, that's the way to do it. Because the reason the pitting is happening is I've had to leave the tile in a water bath for too long. And the longer it sits in the water bath, the more effervescing, the more fizz is happening because all of that air that's trapped in the tile is trying desperately to escape. So literally just by putting that one little wipe down with a damp sponge, it stops it from sinking in too far, which means the wash process is easier. Yeah. I know from last time and this time that the best way to do the ceramics is to work bloody quickly. So you will apply your cyanotype and like you can blow on it if you want. All you need to do is wait for literally probably 10 seconds and the emulsion will have absorbed into the tile enough that you can immediately print on it. You don't want to leave it to dry and be trapped inside of the tile. So you really want to do wipe down with a damp cloth, application of the cyanotype, straight into exposing the tile, and then straight into washing the tile. You know, if you're working with paper or fabric, you might want to prepare those a few hours earlier. But with cyanotype, you need to work quickly and keep that process quite tight together, because the more time that you allow that cyanotype solution to sit in the tile, the harder the wash process becomes. So these are the new tiles that I was making specifically for this workshop. I'm just using old negatives, so it's actually a little bit scratched, but it was more to demonstrate how different the applications actually ended up being. The lines are a little bit more obvious in this piece, and that is because there's just more blue in it than there is in the previous piece. So it doesn't suffer as much from the lines. If you don't like this kind of streaking, then what you're going to have to do is go in one direction and then go in the other, which means you're going to have extra cyanotype. But that's the only way that you're going to really avoid these little stripes. I am not bothered, but you might be. You know, let it dry for a minute, but honestly, it might be more like 10 seconds before the cyanotype solution wants to go under either a UV lamp or out into the sunshine. It needs to be washed in really super cold water. Now, I said for approximately 3 minutes, and this is totally, totally converse to the video that I made a few years ago. And the reason being is because that little damp sponge step that I added into the process radically changed the way that I had to remove the excess solution from the cyanotype. It just came out so much easier. So, and because I kept the wash time really low, and I used running water for my wash time, there was no effervescing. It wasn't sitting in a tray bath. It was having cold water run over the top of it for approximately 3 minutes. Because time is of the essence, then ideally you want to work in the sun if you can, or have a higher powered lamp. The old tiles that I had been making previously, which had slightly black edges, and there was a few different bits and pieces going on, they were exposed under quite low voltage and low wattage UV sodium bulbs. So the exposure time was about 45 minutes. And as I said, by the time you've done the exposure, all of that cyanotype solution is now trapped in the tile, and it's just so much harder to get rid of it. What happened with these ones was it was a beautiful sunny July day in Sunderland, and I could just walk outside with the negative on top of the tile, and you're looking at literally a 2 or 3 minute exposure. It was done phenomenally quick, because it doesn't matter how strong the lamp is, it's never going to be as strong as the sun on a good day. Any day that casts proper shadows is a good day for making ceramic tiles. So the other thing is drying, because no matter how hard you try and how much you wash it, there is always still going to be cyanotype that needs to leach out. So I follow a group on Facebook, and one of the ladies had a fantastic suggestion, and the suggestion was dry your pieces face down. It's so simple. Again, like adding a layer of dampness before you're doing your print, like really, really simple, tiny little tweaks to the process that make all of the difference. So put the image side down directly onto the kitchen roll. And I would do this a few times and then just wash it again. And what you will find is, as I mentioned, that leaching that happens, it'll happen in the opposite direction. So you will end up with these blue marks on the back of the tiles. But guess what? Who cares? Nobody's looking at the back of your tiles, or at least it shouldn't be. So if you lie it down, then basically any excess that gets to the surface of the image will immediately be absorbed by the kitchen roll that it's sitting on. And then in the opposite direction, if it's leaching up to the back, you know, just let it expose in the sun. I'll let these dry in the sun. And because this was all happening on the back of the tile, the front of the tile stayed absolutely brilliant. So you varnish, okay? If you don't seal it with something, and I don't know why this is, but the cyanotype will just fade. So it loses that beautiful, vibrant Prussian blue. So what I found was yacht varnish, gloss finish yacht varnish. It's fairly cheap. It's really easy to apply, and it fixes it enough that the image will still be there forever. But if I flick onto this one, I apply the varnish to the surface and then I wiped it back. So I put quite a bit of varnish on, but I don't want a gloss finish on these tiles. I want a matte finish on the tiles. One, because the varnish yellows over time, and two, because if you've got a thick layer of varnish, there are a lot more things that can pick up textures and stuff like that. So I would just apply the varnish straight on and then wipe it all back with a bit of kitchen roll as soon as I could. So let's talk about problems. These again are ones that I made back in 2018, and I put too much varnish on. There's too much varnish and it started to yellow over time, but also the application of the varnish is not very good. I think that's safe to say. These tiles were also dried with the image facing up, and what you might be able to notice on this image and this next one is that in the center we've got more of the cyanotype leaching up, and that's because I hadn't dried it face down on some kitchen roll. So straight away, use less varnish, and yeah, just definitely use less varnish. And if you can wipe it back with a decent bit of kitchen roll. Don't use cheapy kitchen roll that's just going to disintegrate in your hands. Get some decent stuff that can stand up to working on top of the ceramic. As I explained briefly before, yeah, the bubbles can escape from the ceramic when it's in the wash. And essentially, it just fizzes off the solution. So every single one of these little pitted marks on this tile is where an air bubble has escaped and removed some of the emulsion from the surface. Timing is everything, I guess, with cyanotypes. These cyanotypes that I was making in 2018, I was making more towards winter time, so it was much cooler. I wasn't using the sun, so the exposure times were much longer. And because it wasn't summer, the tiles themselves weren't drying very quickly. So the ones that I just did recently, I could work straight away from one to the other. So I'd go from exposing the image, and then I would lie it face down on that kitchen roll and let it dry in the sun. These ones, they weren't really dry when I applied the varnish. And it created this really weird thing. I'm assuming that it's like a black mold from moisture trapped in the ceramic by the varnish. So, your cyanotypes actually want to be able to breathe, because they're a chemistry that's still active. It's still doing stuff even after you think it's set. And basically, I know for a fact that I've put this on while the tile is too wet, because all of the ones that I did that with ended up with this very bizarre black or darkened outside edge. If you don't put on enough varnish to seal it, then it'll just continue to develop in certain areas. But once again, this wasn't dried with its face down. So maybe you would have less of a problem with the cyanotype continuing to darken down on your image if you're drying it upside down, so the image is in contact with your kitchen roll. Honestly, that seems to make such a heck of a difference. Just really quick recap: work extremely fast, don't use too much varnish, don't apply your varnish while it's wet. Some of you might be here because you are ceramicists and you want to have a go at taking it to the next level. Cyanotype solution, the main ingredient is iron oxide, rust. But obviously, if you're a ceramicist, then you might be aware that oxides can be used to create different effects and different colors on your ceramics. And it's exactly the same with the cyanotype solution. I would love to do more tests with this before the National Glass Centre closes, but I guess we'll have to see. So obviously, I don't know. I've put this just quite big because it's important. Don't varnish it if you're going to fire it. Yeah. So rather than immediately putting a varnish on to fix it, just dry out your tile and then pop it into the kiln and fire it. It's a delicate oxide. We are working on that molecular level, so it can burn out quite quick. You want to fire it at a cone 3. This is as far as I can tell. Cone 3 should get really, really good results. At a push, you might be able to manage a cone 4. But after that, it's going to burn out. And this is what happens to your cyanotype if you do manage to fire it correctly. Again, this is very experimental. This one is even older, and was probably made in about 2014. The porcelain that it was made on hadn't been correctly biscuit fired, so we were fighting against a lot of different problems already to begin with. But what is great about this little piece is that it shows you how orange the rust in the cyanotype solution then turns. When your cyanotype is blue, it's still active, it's still doing stuff, it's still reacting to sunlight. When your cyanotype is being fired and it is turned orange, it's fixed. It's not photographically active anymore, because now it's a different chemistry. So I would love to see if you guys are doing any more stuff with firing pieces, because I think it probably does have a lot of interest to explore. But I know as well that now, with a few more years of experience and understanding of the process in its finer details, we could achieve much better results than this. I know for a fact. For example, we would be able to remove all of that excess cyanotype that has given the whole piece an orange shade. So yeah, let me know if you do any firing tests, because I would love to see. If you are firing anything, oxides, or whatever glazes, always do it in a ventilated area. Or if you're a home ceramicist, put your kiln on in the garage or wherever you might be overnight, so that you're not being subject to any noxious gases that might be released. Not quite ceramics, but interestingly, plaster works as well. It's not as hard wearing as ceramics, I'm going to say that like straight away. But again, the point is that cyanotype is so blooming versatile that you can try it on pretty much anything. I made these really small plaster discs, and sanded them back a little bit, and then applied the cyanotype solution. Now, exactly the same fashion as the clay, if you wash your plaster too much, it's going to want to fall to bits again. Okay, so you want to work quickly with your plaster in the same fashion that you have been working quickly with ceramics. You can use cyanotype on lots of different things. This little fish is broken. I snapped his fin off, but that's part of the problem with plaster, is if it's not also mixed with fabric fibers or something like that, then it's actually really, really brittle, and it'll only take a tiny dink and then your plaster's dropped a bit. These are some more of the plaster tests. I've included it because I put too much varnish on the plaster. So once again, we got this problem where it started to yellow. That's how it should look, with not too much varnish on. And then this is how it ends up looking if you've overexposed it and put too much varnish on. So if you do any experiments with cyanotype and you would like to share them with me, or absolutely, well, if you want to share them with anybody, use hashtag cyanotype. And if you want other people to share your work, then you can also join in with platforms like alternative photography processes, and alternativephotography.com. Or you can tag things with Cyanomasters, and Cyanomasters has done a great job over the last few years of sharing really interesting work that other cyanotype artists are doing across the world. Thank you for sticking it out, and I will see you soon for the next round, which is going to be cyanotype toning. Okay, so again, it'll be a little bit more complex than this, but it's still nothing to worry about. Nice and easy, nice and cheap, can get some good effects. All right, thanks a lot. See you next time.